everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today we are at MBS Equipment Rental just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, for the first part of day one of a 4-day proof that the Anthem ONE really is all that in a bag of potato chips. I met the founder, Justin Evans, at PPE a few months ago, and it wasn't him. We were at the very back where the small stuff is. It was actually, oh, now they're not here. It was actually the Anthem ONE, a wonderful piece. Thank you, Ruben. A wonderful piece of industrial design. This is what attracted me. In fact, it reminded me of nothing so much as Steve Jobs' Next computer. And I had attended the demonstration launch event of the Next many years ago in New York City when Steve Jobs famously had it crash on him. So Justin and I started talking, and I loved this guy. And I found myself thinking, does he have his own reality distortion field, or is the Anthem ONE really all of that? Well, today we're going to find out. We are going to run a test where we're pitting the Anthem ONE against a pile of HMI lights, tungsten lights, another well-known and very highly regarded chip-on-board LED, and we're going to see what it's going to do. Now, the reason why we're doing this here, even though I had one of these sent to me, is because I quickly realized I'm not capable of exploring the full range that this thing is supposed to be capable of. And with that said, let's stop here and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Is there any way, could we get like black duvetine to cover up that window? Thank you, guys. And could we turn off the lights in the office as well? Thank you so much. And there's a light in that hallway. Is that possible as well? This is really the first time most people have never really done a side-by-side. So we're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each light, and we'll go from there. So let's start with the 2 kilowatt tungsten. Now, the first thing everyone should notice is instant on, which is really nice. And the color's incredible. But this is pulling 2,000 watts. And so to run a set on tungsten is just not environmentally friendly. It's not responsible. It's a huge power drag. The generators that you need are massive. And in my opinion, this is, this is the reason that so many grip and lighting people end up with arthritis in their 60s. They're constantly hauling this heavy-ass gear around a set, shot after shot after shot after shot, and that's going to wear out and tear up your body. So also the heat that comes off this is massive. Most people would look at this and go, that's a pretty damn impressive beam spread. So yeah, it's not bad. Shadows are nice. The shadows render nicely. Is this flooded?
Yep.
Let's go to spot. This is demonstrating another problem that I don't really like about analog gear. The mechanics actually wear out pretty darn easy, and they become difficult to work with over time. They need to be replaced a lot. There we go. So let's go back and forth between spot and flood so people can really see the difference. We've spent our whole careers being told that that is a dramatic difference. So not bad. Let's turn that off.
Saving.
Let's turn on the 5K. The 5K should, be the brightest light out here.
Striking.
Pretty impressive spread. Still doesn't quite cover edge to edge on, how wide is this? 38 feet? 30. So it's covering maybe 34 of that, and you can see the vignetting in the corners because this is a barrel-shaped beam, which is extremely artificial. That's not how the sun behaves. So, and everyone should notice, this is also not how we use lights. I'm showing it to you naked. Here's the reality. If you're using this light on a set, the first thing you're going to do is silk it. So we look at this beam and we go, that's nice and bright, but this is the reality. This is what you're really getting. And so now it's a lot softer and it's a lot smoother. But if you look in the corners of that white backdrop, particularly up there, you can see how much you've got in terms of a drop-off.
That's not a full silk either.
What is this, a half? Let's go to the HMI 200.
Saving.
And it's really important. I'm not talking about brands. I don't want to pick on a brand. I'm picking on technology. And when that technology was invented, it was the best of its kind. HMIs were the best of their kind when they came around in the 1950s. But the first thing anyone should notice is, dear God, it takes forever for it to warm up. You know, I can talk for another 2 minutes before it reaches its, proper color temperature. And there's everything else that goes wrong with HMIs. I mean, first off, if you look at my shadow, you never really quite get a hard shadow. And this is lensed. If we took the lens off, it's even worse. Another thing I hate about HMIs is the danger. HMIs are great if you need punch. But when you start thinking about the dangers of this device and the dangers it puts our crews under, the fact that you can't use the bulb for its entire lifespan, because if it is allowed to reach its end of life, it will explode. The fact if you get a hairline crack in the bulb, it can result in UV radiation leaking out of it and actually giving someone a sunburn, a pretty serious one. There's a journalist I know in Texas, and she was on camera. The grip team, her news team, had a 200-watt HMI on the truck. They had dropped it, but everything looked like it was okay. They shot a news story. She was only in front of the light for a few minutes, and they didn't notice until they got back, but she had blisters on her face. And it was because when they had dropped the light accidentally, and they had done their best job inspecting it, there was a hairline fracture in the bulb and UV radiation leaked out, and it caused damage. And the insurance policy had to pay a tremendous amount of money because she was on-air talent. And eventually the TV station said it's just not worth it, and they went back to tungstens. And there's way more problems with that. Let's turn the light off. Now turn it back on. Oh, this is hot restrikeable. Okay, so this one hot restrikes. But most HMIs don't. And high frame rates, it's not flicker free. You can't shoot into the hundreds or thousands of frames per second with it. There's a lot of things that I find about HMIs that drive me crazy, but here's the biggest one. My first job when I was a filmmaker, or when I was a film student at NYU, I was a PA in Los Angeles, and my job was to go to the grip house before the cinematographer would come out, and I would preview HMI heads for him. And my goal was to try and match the color temperature from head to head. We never could get it quite right. There was always drift, and he would say, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, yes, yes. And the no's got pulled back. We'd bring new ones out. We'd try to match them. And then he would have me write down, okay, that one's going to need a quarter CTB. That one's going to need an eighth CTB. So we could dial it in even more specifically. HMIs are honestly a colossal area of frustration. But let's look at the bigger one. Oh, this was the 400, right?
Correct.
Okay, let's look at a 200. By the way, where's the noise coming from? Is that a ballast?
Heater.
Oh, it's a heater? Okay. All right, so this is the 200. Same thing, notice the amount of time it takes to warm up as it's shifting through color temperature to reach its maximum brightness. That's time wasted. Most people would look at this and go, that's a pretty good beam spread. Now here's the reality. This room's not big enough to show what Anthem ONE can do. We wanted a space much, much bigger. Light behaves oddly. I could show it in someone's office and they'd go, that's bright, and I can show it on a 5-story building and they will say, well, now I understand it's damn bright. And that's because we use a special type of LED, which we're about to show to you. We call them LC LEDs, and they result in a level of punch and spread that has never been achieved before. So let's turn off the HMI and let's turn on Anthem. Notice it's the entire wall from edge to edge. It's a 160-degree beam spread. The shadows back in that corner are hard. Look at that light fixture and the shadows that are being thrown up on that ceiling. This space is not big enough to show Anthem ONE. We need a 5-story surface to show what Anthem ONE can do. So, and you'll notice it's completely smooth from edge to edge. Look at the quality of my shadow as I walk past. What you'll notice is even when I'm off axis from the light, I'm way over here and my shadow is still hard. There's no other light that can do this. We call this off-axis punch. And the point of that is because it's really 200 individual light sources stacked as closely together as possible. And when you put that many miniature light sources together, you end up with more forward photons coming out of the system. Everything else is really a 360-degree ball that has light spilling out of it from every direction. And to compensate for that, we've got reflector dishes and lenses that's all meant to sort of correct the beam that Anthem is just capable of doing out of the box without any adjustments. Now, someone may say, I don't want a shadow that hard. That's not a problem. You can silk it like anything else. And so here we take a half silk and put it up. And you'll notice I have to put it damn near next to the light to cover the entire beam, because it's a 160-degree sphere that is coming off the front of the system. Personally, I like to let the air do it. So the way that I light with an Anthem, I like to back it up 100 feet. And so now you can have a light source that's incredibly far away, but it's only pulling 200 watts. It's flicker-free beyond 4,600 frames per second. The color rendition is the second best in the world. It's next to a tungsten. A tungsten is 100, but that's an illusion. We always say the CRI of a tungsten is 100, but we don't take into account its color temperature, because that's 3,200 degrees Kelvin, and we don't live in a 3,200 degrees Kelvin world. We live in a 5,600 degrees Kelvin world. So this is a 96 to a 98. And so it's within 2% of a tungsten, but it's the color temperature of the sun. Whereas these HMIs are about a 92. Now, there's another light on the market that also uses LEDs, but it's also still not a fair fight. So let's turn Anthem off. This is called the Aputure 300D. It's a Chinese light.
This is the most interesting comparison for us at Three Blind Men and an Elephant. We've standardized on Aputure. Among the comparably priced LED fixtures we've reviewed over the past couple of years, they've been the most quiet, reliable, convenient, and color accurate. Best designed and built. And we've never had a failure. In short, Aputure has offered us the optimal set of features, function, price, and trade-offs for what we do. We really like their people too. But we represent just one set of use cases. And while we've never gone hands-on with the 300D, we have been thinking about it to better power our on-location interior shots and exterior daylight fill, always looking for the fastest setup and takedown, most compact, lightest weight, fewest parts and connections, and most cost-effective solution out there. Candidly, we've been making do because of the cost and the lack of a bi-color option, which I like a lot. But maybe we just suck it up and continue working with a single LS-half-W for our two-shot, with diffuser mounted on a separate stand and arm. Maybe we add some flags to our kit with a couple of extra stands. Maybe we switch to a pair of 120Ts instead, with more stands, arms, and diffusers. Both of these solutions would be a lot less expensive than the 300D, and we could always use gels to match ambient lighting. But they'd be slower to set up and take down, more to pack and carry. Ergo, my interest in the Anthem ONE with its compact industrial design, high output, wide beam angle without reflector, quiet operation, interchangeable LC LEDs, and the promise of a new generation of light modifiers, more compact than the traditional deep 3-foot softboxes we use today, or the larger silks possibly in our future. But as I suggested at the beginning, the Anthem ONE may simply be far more than we need, and at our end of the market, it is a significant investment. Still, it is simply too interesting a light, too interesting a story, with too many interesting people, too tantalizing a possibility for getting smaller and bigger at the same time, and possibly too compelling an option for too many of you whose situation differs from ours, not to take the time to really dig into it. Back to the shootout.
It's about $400 less than us. And it's got a all right beam spread. But notice it's still vignetting on the corners. You don't have an even spread across this silk. You're not getting into the rafters and over in that direction. You can actually see that its beam spread is probably around 80 degrees. Let's turn it off and turn the Anthem back on. I don't know if it's worth saving 20% on a light to have that much less beam spread. This is huge. But there's another major difference. We're the company that is patent pending on the removable LED. We invented the technology that makes it possible to take LEDs out of a system so that they now behave like light bulbs. Every other LED on the planet, including the Aputure 300D, have hard soldered LEDs in their system. And once those LEDs die, you have to throw the whole thing away. Now think about that as terms of the return on investment if you're running a grip and lighting company. That means that you have to ask yourself, can I rent this system enough before it's destroyed and I have to replace the whole thing? Whereas with an Anthem ONE, all you have to do is replace the light card the same way that you replace an HMI bulb or a tungsten bulb. But even better, our light cards are rated at 50,000 hours, which means they should last you about a decade. And our light cards cost $169 versus $400 for a light bulb in an HMI 400. And that light bulb in the HMI 400 you'll be lucky if it lasts you 1,000. Am I right on that? About 1,000 hours. So you'll go through 50 of those light bulbs at $400 a piece before you go through one of ours. And ours are so damn tough. We just moved to a pure copper core. We believe that you can run over them with a car and they will still work. So, and that's the durability factor. We've got a video online that actually shows, and this is the thing that we can do that none of these other lights can do. You can take our light, drop it on concrete from 4 feet up, and it will still work. Any of these other lights, if you dropped it on concrete from 4 feet up, it'd be dead. So that's the next, well, yes. Now that's the basics. You've seen the beam spread, you've seen, but someone might say, well, I don't want a beam spread this wide. It's easier to take a wide beam and make it narrow than it is to make a narrow beam and make it wide. So can we put on a lens kit? Well, my team's getting us a lens, and we designed the lens specifically so that it's almost identical to the beam spread that you get with an HMI 400. There's a couple other things that's worth noting. This test in itself is somewhat artificial. I mean, nobody's on a film set doing anything like this. Films are shot differently than this. My attitude is that I designed the light to light the way that, well, I'll put a pause on that. So here you go. This is with, well, sorry, we need to take off the bezel. There we go. So this is with our lens. Let's turn it off and let's turn the 5K tungsten, or actually 400 watt HMI back on.
400 watt. Right. Striking.
Thank you, sir. So while this warms up, the way you get the Roger Deakins look to a movie, first is understanding how the sun behaves. But what I mean by that is you can't have the lights in the house if you're doing a dinner scene around a table. You really need to have the lights outside the window, bounced off a giant 10-foot by 10-foot tarp on the floor, outside the home. And when that light bounces in, it's so soft and beautiful. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And so when someone compares even a 400 watt HMI to an Anthem ONE, it's really not accurate. Anthem ONE used in the real world is more like 2 M18s bounced into a 10-foot by 10-foot surface. That's really what you're getting. So, and think about the effort that goes into setting up 2 M18s and that silk or bounce, whatever the surface is that you're bouncing into, the time that goes into that, the size of the grip team, the wear and tear that's going on their bodies, as opposed to a light that actually just fits in your hand and plugs into the wall. Because those 2 M18s are what, 1.8 kilowatts each? So that's 3.6 kilowatts versus one light that's pulling 200 watts. You could run an entire feature film off of one circuit in a house if you use Anthem ONEs, which means that's the end of generators. And that's better because that means for the first time, sound and lighting don't have to be at war with each other. So that's the beam spread for the HMI. Let's turn the Anthem ONE back on to compare its beam spread with our lens kit in place. So we're still a little wider. Notice we're also a lot smoother. And this is what it is again, naked. Well, also, when you miniaturize lights, you can do some fun things, and so everyone's used to latches and complicated ways of getting a lens in and out of a system. Well, ours is magnetic. Our lenses are polycarbonate. They snap in. I'm a little short, but there you go. That's all it takes to put a lens on. But there's one last thing we should show. We're the only light in the world that's designed to light green screens. So could we quickly drop these, drop the background and switch it to a green screen? Okay, so everybody should notice that we've had two anthems up here. We haven't been using two anthems. We've only been using the one with what has Anthem Light Card Daylight in it. Let's show you what Anthem Light Card Green Screen looks like on a green screen. That's a perfectly lit green screen in 1 second. So, and this green screen's not even close to big enough to demonstrate what Anthem ONE can do. The first test we did with our green screen card was at Troublemaker Studios in Austin, Texas. It's the same green screen that was used for lighting Sin City and Sin City 2, and it's 5 times bigger, and we lit 1/3 of it as fast as we lit this. They did a test to see how quickly they could pull a key. They said it's the best key they have ever pulled for a green screen, and they did it in under 5 seconds. They had no manipulation that was necessary. They just used the color picker tool, clicked on their background, boom, gone, zero noise. And so it's a complete game changer, not just for traditional photography or traditional, filmmaking, but also for visual effects. And the moment you make the light card removable, there's several ambient effects that come out of the lighting system that you don't get with any of these other systems. Number one, LEDs are improving at a rate of about 10% every year. So this is the first time you have a system that's future-proofed against advancements in technology. This year it's putting out 30,000 lumens. Next year, when we can buy even better LEDs, it'll be putting out 36,000 lumens. The year after that, about 42. The path that we are on, this Anthem ONE right here, pulling 200 watts, in about 10 years, will be capable of putting out about 200,000 lumens, or be about the equivalent of about a 5 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt HMI. But it will still only be pulling 200 watts. And you don't have to replace the system. You only have to replace the light card. So it's future-proofed against advancements in LEDs and a continuous, rise in brightness. But as you can see, we can also choose LEDs that are exotic. We can go with things that have never been used in cinema light before. And so we currently have 11 different light cards that are available. We have a daylight card, an interior card, something we call ultra color that is specifically designed for artists of color because there is accidentally, I believe, a normalcy bias in lights, and they only make people who are of European descent look great. If you are of African American descent or Asian or Hispanic, your skin tones just don't look right on under an HMI. But with our ultra color card with a 98 CRI, everybody finally looks good under an artificial lighting system. And we didn't stop there. We figured, well, let's see what else we can do. And so we've got an agriculture card, a military grade IR that works with the new Panasonic camera that has an IR removal filter. And with that, you can illuminate a subject 1.5 miles away, but they don't know that they're being lit. And so think about the implications for something like National Geographic in wanting to do, real world wildlife photography and not manipulate the way animals are behaving at nighttime because they know that they're being artificially lit. If they're lit by an infrared source from 1.5 miles away, you can finally get behavior that's absolutely authentic. We've got red lights, we've got magenta lights, and now we're starting to get down into the black light and UVC spectrum where we can actually kill bacteria in under 30 seconds. All of that out of a single lighting system. So for your purposes, it's a cinema light and a photography light. For our purposes, it is a general purpose industrial light that is designed to disrupt 25 different industries. So that's the basics of Anthem ONE.
Bravo.
Oh, I forgot to mention its price. It's $15.99. So compared to this Joker 400 here, this is $6,600. What does a M5 run for right now, or T5? 800 bucks? But the electricities, am I off?
T5s are cheap, Justin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're cheap.
They're cheap, but the power that it's going to cost to run this, you know, this is 5 kilowatts versus 200 watts. So if you go down the list, you know, the only light that comes close to us in terms of price is the Aputure, which is about 1,100. And that's assuming that the Chinese will still figure out a way to get around the new tariffs that we have in place against China. Good luck with your warranty when you've got to ship something back to Shenzhen, China to get it replaced. There are no repair facilities in the United States yet. And its beam isn't comparable and the LEDs are stuck in the system. There's one other thing I want to point out, because I've actually toured their factory and watched as they made this, and I've interviewed their engineers. And not one of them's a filmmaker, and not one of them really understands what a filmmaker's looking for. So the worst thing about this, this is the only time I'm going to actually point out a competitor's name brand. I don't want to point out most competitors, but this one is because it has the potential to do a lot of damage in our industry. If you'll notice, the front of the LEDs, and you should come over and touch it, has a glass panel on the front. Now the problem with that is LEDs are not cool. I don't even understand how we ever got the reputation that LEDs don't produce heat. All LEDs, the moment they are turned on, reaches a temperature of about 450 degrees centigrade. Not Fahrenheit, centigrade. And their operating temperature is 140. So you've got to understand heat management on an extremely deep level to get that down to the correct temperature. You put a piece of glass on the front, you are refracting the heat back into the LEDs and baking them alive. And so when they claim that you're going to get 20,000 hours out of that, I just don't buy it. I think that you'll be lucky if you get 3,000 to 4,000 hours out of an Aputure system with glass on the front. Their heat management, in my opinion, is not designed the right way. You've got two bottom fans pointing up, which, yes, that sucks heat upwards, and that's great. It works with convection until you tilt it. And now the fans are no longer pointing up, they're pointing backwards, which is one of the reasons why the first Aputures, the Aputure 300s that came out, all had an overheating problem. Anthem ONE's heat system is completely different. We spent 2 years inventing the way to cool this. And I don't want to go into all the details because I know a lot of this is about to go live and I don't want to educate my competitors. But one of the key things that we figured out is by having two different sets of fans in here, a set of fans that pull it from the bottom up and from left to right, you can orient the light in any direction and it always is working with convection so that the heat is flowing up and out of the system. And by doing that, you increase the lifespan of your LEDs by 10x. That's how big a difference it is. If a system is not designed to control heat, it will fail. And if the LEDs are permanently mounted in that system, that means the whole system will fail. And that doesn't make any sense because that means we're just throwing more electronics in a landfill. And grip and lighting companies are already struggling to figure out when's their ROI. I got to buy a sky panel. Can I rent it enough times before another light comes out that I have to replace it with something else? And I don't even know if I made a profit on the thing. When you've got a lighting system that costs $15.99 and you can replace the LED, you know that you can get your ROI and make a profit off the system. So that's the basics. Is there any questions? Is there anything anyone would like to ask? Yes, sir. That's a great question. Dimmable from 0 to 100%. And since you asked about dimmability, I spent the better part of 6 months working on our dimming because we should talk about why LEDs don't dim well. All LEDs are easy to drive at maximum amperage. The problem is, as you start to lower the amperage, there's not enough forward electrons to keep the LED's color temperature stable. And so when you get down to about 10%, the color temperature gets so wonky, it gets to around 2,800 degrees Kelvin. And so most companies just cheat. They go, well, screw it, it dims from 10 to 100, and that's it. We invented a dual driver that's patent pending in our system, and there's a small integrated circuit, a small CPU, that feather switches between one power supply and the secondary driver so that as it's dimming down to 10%, it switches to our own proprietary LED driver so that the color temperature is stable all the way down to about 25 milliwatts. And so do you want to demo that again? And you could go really slow. And this is our Mark I system. The Mark II feathers even better than this. You'll notice there's no color temperature shift and there's no CRI shrink, which is something that most people don't understand is a problem with dimming. When you are dimming an LED and they don't understand how to stabilize it right, your CRI is actually shrinking on you. So they'll say, well, this system has a CRI of 92, only at 100% brightness. You dim that 10%, the CRI might have dropped to 88 or 86, and you can't see that with your eye because your eye white balances so quickly. Our system makes sure that the CRI is always exactly what the light card says it is, and the color temperature is always exactly what it says it is. And you can dim while you're shooting at any frame rate. So you could be shooting at 4,600 frames per second with an Anthem ONE. That's the fastest we've been able to clock it, because we can't find a camera that shoots faster than that. And dim at the same time, and it will still be flicker free with no change in color temperature and no change in CRI. Yes, ma'am.
Why is it the price it is? I feel like you have to charge twice as much.
I don't want to charge twice as much. We have perfectly good margins. We're going to be a very profitable company. But I want to disrupt the whole industry. The goal here is to change the cost of cinema. And if we are, I think most products that are innovative, the inventor's ego gets in the way. And a good example would be Dyson. Dyson will invent something that is cutting edge and amazing, and they feel that because it's cutting edge and amazing, they need to charge this astronomical price. And when you do that, you still allow the customer has a false buying matrix. Now they can go, well, I can get performance, but it's expensive, but I only have this much budget, but it doesn't perform very well. The slogan we're using within our company is, make the movie that you want for the budget that you have. And it's really important to us that film students can work with the same technology that will be used by the biggest movies in Hollywood. And those movies will be able to achieve things they've never done before. Because if a film student can afford 3 or 4 Anthem ONEs by begging mom and dad for Christmas to get a couple systems, and they light their student film with this, and it's the same technology that will be used on A-list movies, a movie like a Star Wars film can light in a way that they never thought was possible before, because the entire cost of grip and lighting is going to go down. And the grip and lighting company doesn't have to worry about going out of business, because now the grip and lighting company isn't just being paid for hauling around heavy stuff, they're being paid for their expertise. I talked with a guy who runs a grip and lighting company in Albuquerque, and he's about 65. And arthritis is something that he's struggling with. And he's already at a point thinking about he has to retire. But if it turns out that the technology is so small and so lightweight it fits in his hand, he doesn't have to retire. And now we can pay for what we really should be paying a key grip for, their brains. Because that key grip has been on way more sets than I have. I'm lucky if I can direct one movie every 2 years. That key grip has probably worked on 24 films by the time I'm ready to do my next movie. And I can walk into a scenario and go, I kind of want to do this and this and this. And the gaffer and the key grip could go, yeah, lay this out here, do this, do this. And they're way ahead of me. I want to pay for their brains, not their arms.
So, what else is included in the price?
$15.99 gets you everything that you see. One of our power supplies, one of our heads, the light cards are another $169. And so a fully loaded system will run you about, $17.99 in change. I'm not doing the math very well off the top of my head.
Are there any other value-added accessories?
We have a whole fleet of accessories, everything from C-clamps to yokes to additional lenses. Anthem arm that is essentially like a Naga arm on steroids that you can articulate the hell out of the system when it's been put up. We've got Anthem base plates. These allow you to snap the systems together. So this is currently just a solo Anthem ONE. But we've got base plate, duet, trio, and quartet. And when you snap all 4 together into a quartet, now you've got a light that, when bounced off of the surface, could compete with about a 10 kilowatt HMI, but you're only pulling 800 watts, and you can pick it up with one hand. And we're still working on accessories. And also the other thing that's really important to note is that we have interchangeable power supplies. This is the first crossover system. And so this is currently running off of what we call Anthem Power Whisper Edition, which is absolutely silent. You can bring it inside. It operates at 14.5 decibels. If anyone wants to walk up to it, put your ear right next to it and you can't hear the fan.
This is extreme heat.
Oh, that's extreme heat, okay. So we did a test for Marvel's The Punisher, and Whisper Edition was overheating on some of those really hot rooftops in Brooklyn. So with this new power supply here, Extreme Heat, you can operate it at 100% brightness all day, every day, and it will not overheat in temperatures exceeding 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. If you dim it 10%, you can have it operate in temperatures exceeding 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Our third power supply is going to be coming out in a month. It's called Strobe Edition, and it converts the entire system over to a strobe system for still photographers. And we haven't tested it yet because it's not 100% done, but our belief is that it will be the brightest strobe system on the planet. And it can do things that no strobe light has ever been capable of doing before. We have such precise control over the way that light comes out of it. It turns the light on and off in 30 microseconds, and it's a perfect square wave of light as it's coming out of the system. So we've been able to invent a new type of way of controlling still photography systems. We call it strobes per second, or SPS. If you can understand frames per second, you can understand strobes per second. There are no cameras that know how to take advantage of this yet, but the first camera that upgrades their firmware to take advantage of our system, they will be able to do 30 strobes per second while working off wall power and 6 strobes per second while working off of our battery. And they'll be able to get around 3,000 stills before they need to go recharge the battery, which only takes 30 minutes. And then our fourth battery is called Anthem Power Mobile Edition, and it turns what you're seeing right here into a mobile powerhouse. So the next time Tom Cruise wants to jump out of an airplane, the G&L team can jump out with them and do 3-point lighting from 15,000 feet above the Earth's surface. So we haven't released this to the general public yet, but this is our new red card. And red is the most difficult frequency of light to create because it vibrates so slowly. It doesn't travel very far. Okay, thank you, sir. Now, this is phenomenal applications within the film industry because, you know, the moment you put a red gel in front of a light, what's it do? It starts to melt, right? So now we don't have to gel to get basic hues. But where we think that this is really going to be a game changer is for firefighters, because this particular frequency of red cuts through smoke much more deeply, and what we're hoping is that we can get this with search and rescue and firefighters so that it's easier for them to see if there's someone still trapped in a burning building.
Shall we kill the house lights, Dustin? Or
Yeah, we should definitely kill the house lights. And it's a shame we're on a green screen, because let's just shine into that wall instead.
This way, how about this way?
Oh, that way's good. That's much more white. Absolutely.
You ready?
Yes, sir. So you can see the applications for, say, runways and airports, or search and rescue, or firefighters, or every low-budget horror film. So, and the beauty is you still get the same consistent beam spread. It's just as smooth. All of our beams are identical. 160-degree beam spread, no hot spot, and what we call off-axis punch, this ability to get hard shadows. I mean, look at where Chris Rainey is right now, and look at how hard his shadow is on the wall, and he's damn near parallel with the light. There's no other light that can generate shadows of that, you know, crispness, and he's 25 feet away. It looks like he's actually on axis.
It's beautiful red, too.
Thank you.
So how many different cards go out with the unit?
The cards, because it's a lot like the Red camera, it's a modular system, so we can't predict what a customer would want, so you buy the cards independently. Think of them as like, here's another good metaphor, it's like a Keurig coffee maker, and you need to decide the K-cups that you want to go with your system. But if it's a visible light card, we deliberately make sure they're all the same price point. When we get into our exotic cards, like military grade IR or medical grade UVC or agriculture, those are more expensive. But if we're talking about anything a filmmaker would use, like this, or daylight, interior, ultra bright, ultra color, all of those are $169. And so it makes it really easy for you to budget it out and go, I want 5 different light cards for a shoot, and those 5 light cards will cost you the equivalent of 2 light bulbs for this 400 watt HMI that can't do any of these things.
So they're not, you don't rent them, they got to buy them.
Well, if a rental house like this was to buy them, then you'd be able to rent the cards here. And that's, you can really see the value proposition. If a rental house embraces this technology, then someone like you can get into a system like this and test it on your next shoot, and the cost will be significantly lower, while at the same time the rental house achieves break-in much faster. Like if I were a rental house, I'd be pricing these at about 150 to 200 bucks a day, and saying in the back of my head, I only need to do 8 rentals before this thing breaks even, and I'm now finally making a profit. Try doing that with a sky panel.
Right.
How about your UV? Is it the same price for your UV?
The UV is more expensive. Those chips cost more for us to purchase and to fabricate. They also have shorter lifespans. All of these are using our custom LEDs. These are not traditional LEDs. We call them LC LEDs. So we should actually explain the difference. And most people don't understand that one LED is not the same as another. Most LEDs, 99% of the LEDs currently used on the planet Earth, have a little piece of gold wire on each side that connects the positive and negative junction. That gold wire is why LEDs fail. Those tiny little pieces of gold wire that you need to see with, say, a microscope at 100x magnification, those pieces of gold wire, if they are zapped by overvoltage, they snap. And if they are exposed to heat over time, they eventually thin out and evaporate. And once one LED is gone, it's like bad Christmas lights. You get an entire row on your LED system that burns out. Your system went from 20,000 lumens to 18. You lost 10% of your brightness. And you eventually get to a point where you say, it's still putting out light, but it's not a very viable instrument anymore. It's only putting out 50%, and you have to weigh if it's time to replace it. Anthem ONE doesn't just have removable light cards. Our LEDs are a fundamentally different way of building an LED. We have a pad on the back that we solder directly to our substrate to eliminate the need for the gold wire. Since we have no gold wire, we can transfer heat 50% faster from the back of our LED into the heat sink, and they never overheat. On top of that, our substrate is pure copper. And so the substrate it's on acts as a heat sink, and then the thermal paste connects it to an even bigger heat sink that then has these fans that guarantee that convection is always going on regardless of which direction the light is oriented in. And so for the first time a customer can say, I don't need to understand heat. Anthem ONE's team understands heat. And that's it.
How long do the batteries last?
The battery for strobe edition, which is when it's working as a still photography strobe system, is about 3,000 pops. And so if you are, say, a Sports Illustrated photographer on a remote island where there's no available power, you could probably go 3 full days before you would need to recharge. Then you go back to your hotel, charge it for 20 to 30 minutes while you're having lunch, and then go back out into the wild for 3 more days before you have to recharge. Now, when it's in constant light mode like this, it needs a hell of a big battery. And because this is a 200 watt system and 4.5 amps, we couldn't use off-the-shelf V-Locks. There were no 48 volt, 4.5 amp batteries available. And I spent the better part of 6 months living in China and working at Chinese factories to figure out why things fail. And so if any of you know Angelo Artuso, he's the attorney I spoke about earlier, lives in Albuquerque. He went with me on one of my trips, and he had learned enough about this stuff that we were in a battery factory in Shenzhen, and he turned to me, and we both almost at the same time said, my God, these things are bombs. And the way most batteries are designed, they are begging to explode. So this took another year of my journey. I spent an entire year trying to come up with a technology that would make batteries detect when a cell was going over voltage before it could happen, to prevent the explosion before it occurred. Everybody else's battery is about containing a fire. Our system was about preventing the fire from happening. And so Anthem Power Mobile Edition, which is about this big, we did not bring it with us because it's a bit cold, it will operate Anthem ONE at 100% brightness for 3 continuous hours with no dimming. It doesn't start to fade out until after the 3-hour mark.
How long to charge it?
About 2. And so a film set could, you know, piggyback on just 2 batteries and go the whole day. Although we're finding, I mean, the shoot that we're doing tonight at Eve's Movie Ranch, we didn't need any batteries and we didn't need any Jennies. We're doing the whole thing off of house power. The biggest circuit we're going to be using is 20 amps, and that's enough to run 3 of our lights. And you can see the coverage we're getting.
But if you have a bad cell in the battery?
If we have a bad cell in the battery detects that bad cell, shuts it off, and reroutes voltage around it. And once we've updated our firmware, it will eventually send a visualization of itself to your phone, telling you when it's time to be sent in for servicing. And so it's the only repairable battery system in the world. You don't replace the battery, you repair it. You pop out the individual dead cells the way that you pop out a spark plug in your car. Because I couldn't live with the idea of putting that much lithium in landfills over and over and over again. Plus, I like the idea of repairing something for 20 bucks rather than replacing it for 1,000.
So the batteries are a circuit?
Yes, it's one of our 4 different power supplies. They'll be, you know, like a theater would never need a battery, so they'll just get an ordinary Anthem Power Whisper Edition. Someone who's shooting in extreme heat, Southern California, parts of Texas, they'll want an extreme heat edition. Someone who's doing a lot of mobile photography, they'll want a mobile edition. And there will be people, I hope, that want to do big budget action films and jump out of an airplane with this. And so that's when you use mobile edition. The biggest area of growth right now is still photographers who are starting to work their way into cinematography. And so that's the reason we created Strobe Edition, is so that someone can start with a really great strobe light and just replace the power system when they want to become a cinematographer and shoot their first movie.
So how many different heads do you have to do all that?
One head does everything. That's why it's called Anthem ONE. And you know, when Red 1 came out, everybody thought it was going to be the end of the camera rental business. It has been anything but the end of the camera rental business. I think what really happened is the Red 1 and DSLRs turned an entire generation of film students into renters and buyers, because it was at a price point that they could afford, and then they could say, let's get into some really cool stuff, some really exotic stuff. So an ordinary human being can buy one of these. But the moment they want to do their first big feature film, they're going to want 6 or 7 or 8, and that's when they come back to the rental house and they can finally load up their minivan, which will become the new equivalent of the 10-ton truck. And so the truth is, it's not a fair fight for any of the other lights, because they can't do any of these things. We start with beam spread because that's where everybody starts thinking about lights. What's its punch? How wide does it go? But when you start thinking about all the other creative things that you can do with Anthem ONE, and its beam spread is superior, and its punch is superior, you put that all together, and we believe that this, if you had to have one light in your kit, this should be the light that you should be carrying around.
I am so interested in what you guys think. Indie filmmakers, what do you think? Gaffers, grips, and lighting guys, what do you think? YouTubers, what do you think? Keep an eye out for part 2, a behind-the-scenes look at the filming of an actual short lit solely with Anthem ONE entitled Honor Among Thieves.